Ideas for Impact, a new podcast where innovation meets sustainability head on. Let's take a fresh look at how we do business. Changemakers are innovating solutions to some of the toughest challenges we face in our world. In the process, they are creating their own mark on industry. Our guests are rebels with a cause. They are tearing down barriers, redefining success, and leaving a mark on their industries. Our guests are the disruptors who refuse to settle for business as usual. Join us to unravel the lessons learned behind their failures and their triumphs and uncover the hidden opportunities for positive change. Co-hosted by me, Joanna Buczkowska-McCumber, and my friend, Deborah Host. What if the global water crisis isn't just a humanitarian emergency, but a failure of the financial system to show up where it's needed most? While nearly 2 billion people on this planet still live without access to safe water, billions of investment dollars sit on the sidelines. Enter WaterEquity Fund, the first impact fund dedicated entirely to solving the global water and sanitation crisis, co-founded by none other than Matt Damon and Gary White. And in this episode, we sit down with Principal Impact at the WaterEquity Fund, Genevieve Kelly, to unpack how the fund is flipping the script, proving that investing in water can generate real returns and measurable impact at the same time. We talk catalytic capital, de-risking for scale, and what it takes to build a market where one never existed. And if you think finance can't be a force for dignity, I urge you to think again. So let's get into this one.
Hi, Genevieve. Nice to have you on the show to talk about water equity.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with the beginning. What was the spark that led to the creation of the Water Equity Fund?
So Water Equity was originally an idea within the nonprofit water.org. Water.org is a nonprofit that focuses on market solutions to water and sanitation. They're looking at this massive challenge, billions of people without access to clean water or a safe sanitation, and saw that there was a market opportunity, meaning that they could use people's demand for better access and channel capital towards it and put it in the hands of people who need it most. So the model they had developed was to work with local financial institutions that were already reaching low-income people who didn't have piped water at home and who didn't have a toilet at home. So we're spending lots of time and money dealing with getting good access. One of the things about water and sanitation is that it's a non-negotiable. So you can't actually survive without either. You need to have a way to drink water and cook with water, and you need to have a place to go to the bathroom. So people who don't have adequate facilities in their homes spend a lot of time worrying about how they're going to get it. They might even spend actually a lot of money, of which they don't have very much, paying someone to help them get that access because it's not being provided through a centralized network. So they don't have a tap at home and they don't have a bathroom at home. And so they're figuring it out on their own. They're basically dealing with this every day. So for those people, they see the value in having adequate water and sanitation, and they're willing to pay for it. The challenge they have is that they don't have $1,000 on hand to spend, or even $500 on hand to spend, because they're low income and they may, whatever they earn, they need to spend that day. So microfinance institutions that already reach this low-income segment of people with small loans to help them build small businesses are already reaching those people who don't have good access and already are providing a solution for them to have a lump sum of cash up front. So water.org worked with those local financial institutions to help offer these loans. And what they saw was there's huge demand. So a loan of, say, $500 in the hands of someone who doesn't have good access to water and sanitation, they can build a toilet, they can construct a tap to connect them to a network. It's valuable to them, so they're willing to pay that interest on top of that loan in exchange for that lump sum upfront to get them the access that they need. And it was scaling really quickly. So they were seeing that lots of people were taking it out. And they were repaying. So they were actually able to help the financial institutions make this into a viable product to offer to the market. The constraint was that the financial institutions themselves didn't have the capital they needed. So that's when our co-founders, Matt Damon and Gary White, sat down and said, what we really need is to channel the capital markets to these local institutions to help solve this problem. So they founded WaterEquity to solve that gap. So WaterEquity raises capital, and then we deploy it into water and sanitation. And the first place that we focused were these microfinance institutions that were channeling that money into the hands of low-income clients. And since then, we've expanded to also provide capital to enterprises, so companies in the water and sanitation sector, and into infrastructure projects in water and sanitation.
So it's interesting because the idea of philanthropy could only go so far, and finance became a solution for, let's just call it personal hygiene. But when you want to go bigger, like, was philanthropy still not the solution, or were you seeing a blended approach? Can you describe that a bit more?
Yeah. The way that we see this is that we can't be working independently. It's not just return-seeking capital, and it's not just philanthropy. Each type of capital is super important for different types of consumers or different stages of a business. So where we see philanthropy really being important is at the early stage, either a seed stage company or piloting a project, or helping to prove to a financial institution that this model can work. So bringing that capital to bear when you're testing something new can be really transformative. When there's a proven solution, that's where we see WaterEquity coming in to help scale it up to get to the next level. So really working together across that continuum.
And so how, when you look at and think about the fund and you look at your framework for the returns that you seek as a financial vehicle, how do you think about, and how do you then operationalize that? Obviously financial returns are important, but how do you actually think about other returns, like from an impact perspective, in terms of equity, in terms of, individuals supported, and looking at that, and considering that transformative impact that happens through this work? How do you look at that from a framework perspective at WaterEquity?
Yeah, I actually think WaterEquity is very lucky among impact investors. So we call ourselves an impact investor. We invest for a financial return. That's what we're aiming for. So we can provide that back to our investors wherever we can, and also impact returns wherever we can. So that's what we're trying to do. And unlike a lot of impact investors, we are laser focused on one objective, and that's solving the global water crisis. Everyone who comes into our company knows exactly what we stand for and what we're investing for. And that guides all of our decisions. It guides our organizational culture, our strategy, and our process. So having that very clear objective, I think, makes it easier for us to embed equity and to consider impact alongside return in everything that we do. So from our board all the way down to the people who are actually getting money out the door and working on transactions, everyone's aligned around that mission. And at a strategy level, it helps us identify where we should invest. It helps us prioritize how we put our investors' dollars to work for water and sanitation. What we try to do is identify where there's an investable market, because one thing that we've seen is that water and sanitation is a huge challenge, and there are some segments where return-seeking capital can really move the needle, and others where philanthropy is more appropriate, or maybe a local bank providing low-interest financing is more appropriate. So where should WaterEquity come in and really make sure that we're aligned with our mission? That's one one area. And then making sure that we're doing the most good and the least harm with our dollars also colors everything we do. So we take a really close look at every transaction, trying to understand, okay, is this really moving the needle towards solving the global water and sanitation crisis? And also considering, is there any harm that's happening as a result of our capital? And looking at those in balance. And then finally, I think in terms of our approach, it's really listening to the people who are in need. We do take a demand-driven approach, whether it's investing in a woman who doesn't have a bathroom at home, and so helping her figure out how can she get out this loan to have a bathroom, or working with a municipality where they have a population of 1 million people, but only 500,000 of those people have tap water, piped water, making sure that the investment is designed to serve that demand is really how we structure all of our investments. And then once we've invested, we go back and we talk to the people who we served and understand how things went, what worked, what didn't work. And we take that and we learn from it in the future. So I think it's really across everything we do. And it's thinking both about the return and the impact side by side.
Thanks, Genevieve. I actually really appreciate, you sharing that entire approach, and that also that you look at it from like, are there any negative repercussions from our investments or the work we're doing, which I think is not always something that investors are looking at necessarily. They're only looking for like that positive long-term outcome. So I think that's like really interesting and an important consideration.
And then in terms of the investors, like, how do you attract the fund to investors with this dual notion? Because I think this idea of philanthropy or investment with return, that's sometimes two different people, two different wallets. So have you found that you have to almost have to divide the fund in half? Like, can you explain how this works?
Yes, it's often two different, it might be one person with two different entities through which they are donating and investing. And we see them really as side by side. So actually what we're trying to do is relay exactly that message, that it's really the combination of philanthropy and investments where we can get some scale. And where we've seen a lot of interesting work is among corporations, actually, that are donating to water.org to do that seed stage, more philanthropic funded work, and then also investing in WaterEquity to achieve all of their goals. And I think the more that we're aligning our fundraising mission, that there's a portion of your capital as a high net worth individual or a corporation or a foundation that you are donating, and there's a portion that you're investing. Think about that together. Like, let's consider that together as you're trying to align your money with your values. Water.org and WaterEquity together can help you achieve, both.
I think you sort of illustrate with your model to some degree the creative ways that organizations and investors and sort of folks working in the impact space are building almost their diverse vehicles for making impact. It's not always like one entity or one type of doing something. And so that brings me to this question around, there's a lot of new words flying around and ways of doing in the particularly in the impact investing space, in the finance space, like catalytic capital, blended finance, creative de-risking models, you name it. There's like lots of different things moving around that folks are using or tapping into. And, I'd be curious to hear like how WaterEquity Fund has actually, approached innovative ways of structuring your fund or doing the work or building your framework. If you could speak to that.
Yeah, we definitely see that the importance of catalytic capital and those blended structures. And it's that the idea of philanthropic dollars coming alongside the investment dollars to get to scale. the way that we have approached it is actually a little bit different. We typically aren't looking at a structure within our funds. And instead, we're thinking about this family of companies that we're operating alongside that are, so water.org providing that philanthropic capital. And actually, one example of how we work together is as we're investing in water and sanitation infrastructure, one of the big challenges is not just that there's not enough money going to water and sanitation infrastructure, it's actually that there's not enough projects that are investable. So there's a lot of investors who would be interested in going into water infrastructure, but they can't find the projects that meet their needs. Either they're too high risk or the return is not structured the way they need it. So water.org recently launched a project finance company, a project development company called WaterConnect. So WaterConnect is itself a blended model. They're going to take philanthropic dollars and turn it into this risk capital at a really early stage of project development. So coming in and taking a stake in the project, they're able to take on that risk, and then Water Equity can come in once the project is ready for construction. So Water Equity couldn't provide that really early high risk capital, but water.org through this project development company, WaterConnect, can help de-risk the project and build pipeline. And the idea is that they will have a philanthropically funded fund that will be able to be recycled into new projects. So as projects are successful, they'll get repaid, and then we'll be able to deploy that into new projects. So kind of like a perpetuating philanthropic fund to build that pipeline. So that's an example of the way that catalytic finance is so important for an investor like Water Equity and the different structures that we could use to actually get there.
This is fascinating to me because it's almost like this idea of having a fund, a nonprofit working together makes so much sense, especially when you're in a global space where you need different expertise when it comes to cultural context, figuring out different models, making sure that you're not bleeding assumptions into any solution or any problem, and really getting to the roots of what challenges are and trying to use all the resources out there to achieve some level of success. That said, what is success? Like, I'm really curious if you have an example of something that maybe water.org and Water Equity work together to create what you believe is this great case study of how investing in a resource that's otherwise invisible to most can be seen as an opportunity, and ideally replicated may not be feasible, but seen to others in this space as opportunities where they can also get involved in offering similar solutions.
So what is success? For both water.org and Water Equity, success is really solving the global water crisis. And we think we can do it in our lifetime if we're channeling capital towards this problem and putting it in the hands of people who know how they want to use it. And one way that we really see that in action is when we go past the numbers and we talk to people who've used those dollars. One of the biggest success stories is in India. That's where water.org started, and actually also where Water Equity started investing. So we have a shared partner in India called Credit Access Grameen. It's one of the largest microfinance institutions in India. They serve, I think it's over 2 million clients now. So they're massive. And they're really focused on women, low-income clients. So exactly the people who really need that water and sanitation. Water.org started working with them to help develop this product, this microfinance product. And it scaled up really, really quickly. And since we've started working with Credit Access Grameen, Water Equity has invested, I believe it's over $20 million into this company in loans that we've offered over the course of 6 years. And they have reached over 3 million people with access to water and sanitation. So huge numbers. And that the ability to scale is about, finding the right partner at the right time who was able to actually execute on this. And because they're such a big entity and they serve exactly the people that we are hoping to reach, they showed that this was really a model that could work. And with that success, that model scaled across India and is also in other countries. So we've partnered with water.org to replicate this in Kenya, in Ecuador, in Peru, and in Indonesia. So in countries really all over the global south. Where it really hits home is when you actually go talk to people who all of a sudden can turn on a tap in their kitchen and provide water for their kids. I was in Kenya talking to a grandmother who lives about 2 hours outside of Nairobi, and she lives there with her grandkids. Her daughter works in Nairobi during the week, and she's alone taking care of the kids while her daughter is at work. And she previously didn't have a way to get water in her home. She was able to take out a loan and put a pump in that was pumping water, groundwater, so that she could use it. It was a solar pump, so it was basically free as long as it was sunny. And she no longer had to pay someone to haul her water. She was physically unable to get water herself. Her kids were also too young, so her grandkids were too young. So she was having to pay someone to bring it for her. And with this solar pump, she was able to get it herself when she needed it, have it in her home to make sure her grandkids had water to drink and she had water to cook with. And when you talk to someone who previously had to go through so much to deal with getting just that basic access, and then through a small loan, they were able to bring on a technology that is pretty simple and low cost to someone living in the United States, but makes a huge transformative difference in her quality of life. It really brings it home how important it is to think about the big numbers, but also to remember really what's happening on the ground in people's lives.
Well, that's so, like, I think that's so interesting because, like, obviously you've built, you've got a long history of doing, this work through water.org and now with the fund. And a lot of the work that you do does happen at, I'd say, like a scale that's pretty sizable, based on just like your activities and the work and your presence as an organization, or sort of like a family of organizations, if you will. But there's a lot of like companies in the water space. They're typically like small startups. They're scrappy. There's things like indigenous-led projects, really grassroots disruptors and innovators. How do you approach work, not just like working, but maybe like even supporting some of these scrappier, newer initiatives that are popping up? I know, when we look at like the traditional venture model, those could be seen as competition sometimes. But I know like a lot of the times in the impact space, that's not the case. I'd love to hear from you. Like, how do you, not only the folks that you invest in, but like others that are playing in this space, how do you work with them? How do you support them?
I have two answers to your question. It's a great question. First is that water is super local. So unlike, say, you're focused on, carbon mitigation, you can plant a tree in one country and you're solving kind of a global challenge for everyone. You install some kind of decarbonization technology and you're helping this global problem at scale. Whereas with water, it's really about where you live, the water basin that you live in, the city that you live in, the weather patterns that you yourself are seeing in your location. So you have to get hyper-local to be effective, because there is no one global solution, just because of the nature of the resource that we're talking about. Then you kind of layer on top of that how personal water and sanitation is, like how you cook, what you're comfortable drinking, where you like to go to the bathroom. That is super personal and also cultural. So those two together mean that you can't do this at a 10,000 foot level successfully. You have to do it on the ground. One way that Water Equity does this is investing, where there's demand. So we're demand led. We're not telling people what technology to use. We're not telling them how to structure projects. We're not telling them what kind of facility they should build for their own homes. They tell us, and then we decide, okay, is this aligned with what we're trying to achieve as well? And where there's a strong partnership, then we'll invest. So I would say you have to operate that way if you're in the water space. And then the other piece is that there's lots of places where the pipe network doesn't reach. So you're a low-income person living in a city or a peri-urban region, and there is a water network in your city, but it just isn't in your neighborhood at all. And so you're relying on entrepreneurs to help get you water from A to B. Maybe you have to go find it yourself, but if you have a little bit of money, you're probably paying someone to bring it to you. So what we also do is try to see how can we help those entrepreneurs get better quality water that's more affordable to people who are not being served by those municipal networks. So that's investing through local banks that have already outreach to those entrepreneurs and helping them identify that local opportunity so that they can help scale up those ecosystems. And then I guess I have three answers to your question. And then my third answer would be that Water Equity also can't operate in a vacuum. We have one strategy, and that's, we're looking at scaling. So we're really coming in at where it's more mature, proven, and we're coming in at the growth stage. And we need to help support those earlier stage entrepreneurs and models so that they can get to scale. And it can be really tough because water requires, it's regulated. You need to be really involved with government. Again, it's super context specific, and it's technically difficult. You need engineers and technical experts. So Water Equity comes in with basically the easiest thing, which is money. And we need to partner with everyone else to do all that hard work. So we definitely see the need for collaboration across the whole sector, whether it's, super local collaboration or across like the areas of technical expertise to make this mission succeed.
That's good. Thank you. And thank you for the three answers. They were all great. I'm actually super curious too on that follow-up, it's sort of like the flip of the coin. It's like, looking externally at all the entrepreneurs and all the innovators doing the work that you're investing in. I'm actually also super curious to hear about like the relationships and the way that you have to communicate and engage your interest holders and your LPs and what that actually looks like for you. Because obviously like both are very important, right? Like the entrepreneur is important, but also like the LPs are important. They're, part of that, your whole family of making this work.
Yeah, we're very lucky because our LPs come to us really for the mission. So they are the investors who are interested in our funds. They've kind of screened themselves out. If all they're looking for is a generic emerging markets exposure, we're not the right fit for them. So the LPs who are partnering with us really care about the impact that we're generating as much as they care about the financial return that we're providing back to them. And so what we try to understand is, one, what kind of information do they need about the impact that's being generated on the ground? So like that reporting piece for impact is really important. And making sure that we know, are they investing in us because they care about women and girls? Are they investing in us because they care about, water sustainability? Are they investing in us because they care about public health? All of those issues touch water and sanitation. And the more we can understand their motivations for coming into the space, I think the better we can provide them with that data and insights that they need to make sure that their investments are aligned with their own missions.
With impact investing comes impact reporting and impact measurement and all these other criterias and priorities that get thrown into the mix of just what's normally required. Is there a standard you adhere to? Have you created your own? How does it work? Can you explain this? Because it is an area where I feel like every day the definition of sustainability, someone will be like, what does sustainability even mean? And you're like, all right, here we go again. Like, so I'm curious what Water Equity does. And is it very different from what water.org does because of its financial lens?
Yeah, Deborah, you're asking a dangerous question because I could talk about this for 3 hours because I'm a super big impact geek. So I'm part of that community of people who love talking about metrics and parsing through definitions and frameworks and thinking about, how do we frame it? And also like, where's the meaning? How do you make sure that capital is driven towards that impact? So this is near and dear to my heart.
Sorry.
So I think it's really interesting to think about impact investing. If you think about impact measurement, the way that you sort of aligned with financial accounting. So with financial accounting, there is a recognized practice that everybody uses. Now there's like interpretations within that framework. So you might look at someone's books and think, that was an interesting decision that team made there. But you can interpret it, and it's using the same metrics and the same framework. And I think it's really exciting that the impact side of impact investing is getting there. So in the last 10 years, there's been an increasing standardization of the way we talk about impact and the way that we measure impact and the way that we report on impact. So Water Equity is definitely wanting to make sure that we are providing investors with that with that set of standards and helping push the market to get there also. So one of if there are people who are interested, IRIS and IRIS Plus is a set of indicators. The Impact Management Project helps define what impact is. And then there's lots of sort of like more ESG focused reporting frameworks out there that investors might be aligned with. So within that framework, though, there's lots of room for aligning it with your own needs as an impact investor. So we do create our own impact frameworks, and we have reporting that's aligned with those standards. And where I see Water Equity having an advantage actually in the market is that we are partnered with water.org. And water.org has these really amazing data systems. So one of the things that I think is really special about them is that they've been doing this for over a decade, and they have a bunch of survey data and performance data from the partners that they've worked with. So if we're interested in understanding, this deal, are they really reaching people who don't have the access that they need versus this other deal over here? Is this financial institution maybe reaching a higher income segment, and maybe the people that they're serving over here are less in need? We actually have the data to make those decisions. So data is a huge gap in impact investing, and we come with a base of data, like this baseline of data from water.org, which is super helpful and helps us really make sure that we understand what is happening on the ground, like what are those outcomes that people are experiencing, and getting that feedback. So I think that is the difference in working with a nonprofit, that they have that mindset already and they can go really deep.
Yeah, I think that is actually like so important. It's like having the framework and then having the ability to operationalize that, right, in your organization, in your fund, and within the team too. I think that is a key part. It's like having that literacy amongst the folks that are working with you internally and also with the companies on the ground. So one final question for you, which, obviously you've worked with a lot of individuals and startups and invested into them, but I'd love to hear, maybe a moment or a story that comes to mind that like reminds you why you do this work and why this work is so important. And that perhaps is like, obviously we were just talking about impact and reporting and data and all of those like metric pieces, but like, and those are very important. But is there like a story or, a moment that reminds you of like the importance of this work?
Yeah. Actually, I would say that, so I live in Washington, D.C., and I have a bathroom and a tap at my home. And it's really when water becomes at the forefront of my own life that I remember, oh yeah, I work all day on this issue. You know, I'm focused on water and sanitation all day long, but I don't have to personally worry about it. But when you see in the news like water shortages or flooding, or in DC, we've had some, boil water advisories in the summertime recently because there's like algal blooms in our systems, and our own system goes down for, a day or two, and how challenging that is, like how hard it is to have to figure out where I'm going to get my own family our water and how we're going to flush our toilet. That makes me really not take for granted what everyone has here, pretty much. I mean, there are people who don't have good access in the United States, but most of us don't have to think about it. And how much of like added burden mentally that adds to my own life whenever it happens really brings home for me like how lucky we are and how this is all possible. So we've had good water and sanitation in the US since the 1920s. And I think it's imperative that we bring that to everyone around the world because it is a human right. Everyone deserves the access that we have here in the US. And the more people who recognize that and can understand how hard it is to live without it, I feel like the more money and support we'll get for this sector. So that really, I know it's kind of unusual that it happens, but when it does, it really hits home.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like, obviously I'm in Canada. It's sort of very similar to the United States in terms of most communities, most individuals have, the privilege that we definitely take for granted of having clean water. There are communities, and specifically Indigenous communities in Canada, that still don't have access to clean water and sanitation systems, which reminds you that there is a lot of work to be done in this space. And I think a space that often folks forget about, right? How important this is, yet water is key to living in general. So
yeah, and just it's always the most marginalized communities within any country that don't have access. So in the United States, in Jackson, Mississippi, that whole network went offline. In Flint, Michigan, they were drinking bottled water. This is not just a problem in India. It's definitely a problem here too. And the more attention we can pay to water, I think, it lifts everyone up. So.
Amazing.
Genevieve, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I hope our listeners and enjoy this show. And if anything, it makes everyone think twice when they drink a glass of water today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun.
As we wrap up today's episode, we hope you're leaving with insights that ignite a spark within you. At the core of every story we cover lies the undeniable truth. What truly drives impact is the relentless pursuit of change, paired with a deep commitment to the greater good. We're always reminded that making a mark on the world is not an easy task and isn't just about breaking through barriers. It's about thinking differently about what sustainability means in our ever-changing world and what is possible in creating it. Thank you so much for joining us on Ideas for Impact, where rebels with a cause redefine the meaning of what is possible. For more episodes that challenge the norm, follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, always dive deeper into our journey with us at ideasforimpactagency.com. Until next time, friends, keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible.